Hi, my name's Rod Sowden, the Managing Director of Aspire. I'd like to welcome you to the Aspire Europe Limited Competence Governance course. This is Module 3, and we're going to be looking at the concepts around building capability. After reviewing something like 200 or 300 organisations using P3M3, which at the end of the day is all about capability measurement, the one lesson that we can bring you, the kind of secret source of all this stuff, is balance. Capability is about people and the processes they use, possibly the systems that support them. And if you keep that in balance, you'll make it up to level 3 maturity, which is what most people aspire to. Level 3 is consistency. However, most organisations don't achieve that balance. They lurch towards lots of training, but not having the processes and systems behind them, or they'll spend loads of money on processes and systems and then train people on something else. Like they'll teach them Prince 2, but they've got customized systems. So they end up with this imbalance, and that's what affects the performance in terms of governance and controls. So that's the big message, and you're getting it in slide 1. It's all about balance. So let's start with the operating model. So there's two sides of it. We've got processes and people. So we'll look at this bit first. The operating framework, as we call it, has a number of components. Now, I'm sure you're aware of all this, that if you go out into the marketplace looking for program or project training, 3 primary organisations in the UK will pop up. Axelos with their suite of Prince 2 and MSP and stuff. APM have got their qualifications, and then there's the APM group who also have a range of project qualifications. So you've got a choice, and if you spread your net wider, you also have PMI, the US-based Project Management Institute, who are experts in this field. So which one of those should you use? Because you've got to start somewhere. Nobody really sits down and starts building a project and program framework from scratch. You're going to decide one of those. Now, the truth is, not one of them is completely outstanding. Potentially Axelos for program management and portfolio management, but there's still a bit of a debate about that. For project management, you have a huge amount of choice, and particularly in those groups, you'd probably be better off mixing and matching, if I was honest. Well, the value you get from going from one is you have a consistent set of terminology, which you kind of lose if you start mixing and matching. But that's what you get from the marketplace. And the source of many failures is we're adopting MSP, or we're adopting Prince 2, or we're adopting APM without thinking about the next bit, because the next bit is what your business needs. So it will depend which industry you're in, about what flavour of it you need. So if you're in IT, you might look at maybe Prince 2 more. If you're in construction, you might need to think more about APM. So we're looking at the industry that you're in to help select it. And then, of course, there's your own experience. Now, you may be in the construction industry, but you may be big on technology. So you may have other issues you need to consider in this stuff. So we have to take what's in the marketplace, mix it on our palette with what the industry expects from you and your own experiences, and then you end up with a framework that's correct for you. Okay, so if we just take a little case study, a couple, Network Rail or highways, both massive spenders on projects. They use Prince 2 for their gated process. They quite often use APM for their body of knowledge. Industry practice, obviously the rail sector has their own practices, the highway sector, IT sectors, lots of sectors have their own practices. They need to blend that in to create a framework that works for you. Now, if you just took the marketplace one, which we see far too often in level 1s, try and implement it without adopting it to your own context, you will end up in, well, you're going to fail basically. So that's the things to consider when you're putting together your operating framework. Now we'll have a little look at what that means in terms of your people. When we are thinking about the professional development strategy for the program and project teams, there's a number of factors we need to consider when we build it. So first of all, we need to think about the business need. Do we need long-term investment in professionals, or are we going to bring them in to get the job done? All right. So we need to think about how serious the business is about this long term. Second is the operating framework going to use, because that will set out what we need to know. The operating framework sets out your controls and governance and how you're going to do all the stuff. And from once you've got that in place, you can think about the competency framework. So what levels of knowledge do people need to know about your operating framework to do their job effectively? And from that, we can start thinking about a training development strategy. And from that point, we can then start to think, well, okay, how are we going to achieve these things? How do we link the framework with the competencies and the organisational structure so that we understand where the authority lands? And all that sort of stuff then blends together into the training delivery plan. One thing that's often forgotten is, what do we mean by competent? A competent person, somebody that's skilled and knows how to do a job effectively, that you can trust, and that's probably got some accreditation to go with it. Now, the fact you're doing this course means that you're aspiring to more than just the standard level of qualification. But how do you become a competent person? At which point are you competent versus any other status? So the general journey around this, if we were just to hone in on risk, is at some point you're unaware. Now you think about the people around a program or project, and there's 19 odd processes and topics that we deal with. So there'll be some people that are unaware of all of it, but some people have some insight into some of it. So here we have sort of a standard 6-stage approach. So you are unaware, so you don't kind of understand, say, how risk works. You might even know some of the words, but you've heard the words like impact, but you don't know how they fit together. First step is to get people up to aware of basic working knowledge, so they're familiar with the language, and that they can listen in on a conversation and identify and understand what's going on, but you wouldn't expect them particularly to contribute. Then we get to capable, when they've got a bit more of an understanding of what has to be done, and this is where formal training quite often comes in. Our fundamentals courses are designed to give them that. They understand the cycle of things that go on in risks, they'll understand some of the key responsibilities, but you wouldn't want them running the risk register, or you might be giving them a low risk project to run. Then we're getting to competent, and they're practiced in using the techniques. It's the next stage on. They've tried them out, they've successfully run a few projects, done the risk properly. They've probably got some qualifications as well, like an APM practitioner, or they might have Prince 2 or MSP practitioner. That's when they're competent. Then we move up to professional, where they've got significant experience. And this has been a gap in the training market, which is why you're doing the competence course, because we've targeted those courses at this. Now, for us, the big difference in this one is the ability to use techniques quite often, understand the challenges, and actually have solutions. And then ultimately you have the expert, who's the organisation's thought leader, in effect, probably researches things in the industry, accredited at a very high level, and is probably coaching and educating others. So there's a competence journey. So when you're putting a training plan together, just sending everybody on a Prince 2 or APM foundation course isn't going to get you very far. But different roles need different levels. So the program managers you'd expect to be getting professional in most of the areas, but there would be areas that they wouldn't need to have that in. All right. If you were the risk manager, we'd expect you to be up to the professional level in risk and probably controls, but you probably wouldn't need to be there on some of the other ones like I don't know, benefits or stakeholder. So when you're looking at a competence framework, people have different levels and different roles. So what options are there out there? So there's a number of competence frameworks. The popular ones, and these are all acronyms, aren't they, at the moment? So PDCS is the Project Delivery Competence Framework used by the UK public sector. We've got the APM, the professional body of the project management world, their body of knowledge. And then we've got P3M3, which is obviously the competence framework, which is the one we preferred. We've translated that from being organisational competency into people competency on the logic that if the organisation has to do it, then the people need to do it as well. And then finally, there's PMI, which is the American Project Management Institute. They have a competence framework used extensively by global organisations who are based in the US. But they all basically look at the same areas. I mean, there's a whole bunch of topics. Whichever one of those frameworks you looked at, you'd expect to see 5 stages of competency around these: asset, benefits, controls, framework, stakeholder, planning, resource, all that kind of stuff. They're not that much different, to be honest. It just happens to be which philosophy is your organisation bought into. This matrix takes a slightly unusual view, or a different view, of the way competencies work. And rather than looking at steps through the competency ladder, it's looking at 2 different dimensions of competency. So when we're looking at it from an organisation, we've got individual competence, team competence, and the overall organisational competence. And of course, they feed each other. Individuals feed into teams, and teams feed into organisations. And in this model, we're seeing 3 different types of competence. We've got behavioural competence, which is the way things work, the way we as individuals function, or how we function within a team. Do we have strong team values? Are we stable? And how do those teams behave as part of a wider organisation? Are they a little bit like tribes who want to do it their own way, or do they all work to the common goal? Then we've got technical competence, which in project management is really about your ability to run a project. So technical competencies around planning and that kind of stuff. Many of the best practice guides, when it comes to technical competencies, are really thinking in terms of teams rather than individual, or it thinks in terms of an organisation. So if you read Prince 2, it says what the organisation should do or what teams should do, as opposed to what an individual needs to do. So they're kind of interesting. Sometimes these best practice guides slot into different places in this matrix. They're not all consistent. And then we have the contextual competence. So you could be a project manager who is very determined to get the job done. So you've got the behavioural competence. You've got all the technical qualifications. So you're very good at every aspect of project management. And then you might choose to work in construction. So then you become very au fait with the construction industry. So you mix all your competencies together, or you could be working in ICT, or you could be doing business change, or you could be doing something else. So contextual competence can come in the form of individuals. It can come in the form of teams. So if you're running a program, you may well have the technical team. You may have the FM or construction team, because they're used to working with certain methods. And then at the organisational level, have the organisation. This is why you would might bring in a consultancy. You might bring us in because we specialise in big business change. So we would have the contextual competence that maybe your organisation doesn't have. Or you could bring in a construction company to help build refurbish the office. So competence is at 3 levels, and it also depends on your perspective. But individuals form teams, and teams build organisational perspectives. Okay, it's a different view on this, because most of the competence stuff's about building individuals. But this one recognises that you've got to build teams as well, because you can have great individuals but poor teams, and you can actually have really good teams but still not have organisational maturity and performance. Now, an interesting variation on the theme is the role of the sponsor. Now, what do we do with the sponsors? Yeah, do they need to know all the 16, 17 topics? What is it they need to know? So we did some work for a client, and we came up with just 4 areas of competence, which was about leadership, about developing and owning a business case, maintaining focus on 2 main things during a program: risk and benefits. If you get those 2 right, then they'll stay on track. and how they manage and control the governance around the project or program. So that was, they didn't need to be experts, but they had to have enough knowledge to be able to manage this. And then we created 4 levels. So, provisional, they'd be doing their first project. Business change leaders may have been sponsors a few times. The level 3, proper business sponsor, they'll be taking on the programs, and then you may, at the highest level, exec sponsor, be taking on a pan organizational program. So there was a different view that we took, rather than try to make a highly complex competency model, and around one of the common ones, because they don't really think about things from the perspective of sponsor. Now, other things that we had to think about were, okay, to be a sponsor, you needed to have knowledge, behavior, and skills, but they were about being a leader of a project and program and just knowing where to pull levers or probe a bit deeper. So there was one level of competence. We then thought about what else is there, and the big difference is they need authority. And one of the issues that we had dealing with one particular organisation and their sponsors was actually they weren't given the authority. So they were kind of made accountable, but weren't given the tools they needed to turn that into performance. So lots of projects were going wrong because the traditional organisational governance decision making was still in place and couldn't cope with the project decision making. This is a really great piece of insight. It came from Cranfield in the mid-noughties and really changed the way we viewed the programme management profession. And it broke the link that programme managers had to come from a project management background, and it threw a new light on the situation. So what they basically discovered was there was, down the left-hand side, there's about 20 or 30 attributes there, which they looked at and they compared people. So granularity of focus, emotional attachment, all those kind of things. And they looked at that and said, well, what do different program managers do? And they identified that there were 4 levels of program manager. Level 1 was the basically highly detailed, focused individual that was tracking and analysing data and reports all over the place. They were called the level 1s. So, and then there were level 4 were the strategic, abstract thinkers. Now, these were the guys who could look into the future, do visions, take people on with them on the journey, and really help the organisation to buy into a future concept. Now, the inference was at the time that level 1 were the high performing project director types, project manager types, and the level 4 were the strategic thinkers who had maybe come out of some other source. Now, where we found this particularly interesting ourselves was that actually we recognize that level 1 is the type of person that you need during the absolute delivery of your project, whereas the level 4 is the type that you need at the start of your project or program. So they would be there at the beginning doing the networking and the influencing, and the level 2s and 3s would sit somewhere in the middle. Yep, so as the program became a little bit more real, you might be going for a level 3, so less abstraction, starting to think in more detail. Then you might go to a level 2, where where again it's dropping to the next level of detail. So you had to tie it to the life cycle. Now, the original research kind of inferred that level 4s were better than level 1s, but I think we've seen in our experience that you need level 4s at certain stages and level 1s at others. The other thing to remember is their relationship with the sponsor. If you've got a sponsor that's a level 4, they probably need a level 1 program manager, even if they don't realize it. What you've got to watch out for is 2 of the same. So if you have a sponsor or SRO that's strategic thinking, and the program manager thinks that way, then they'll get on like a house on fire, but it won't necessarily deliver the results that are needed because they'll be too busy abstracting. Equally, if you've got 2 level 1s who are all about detail, they'll never see the bigger picture. So you need to have this balance. As we've mentioned a couple of times in this video, it's all about balance, but this one's particularly valuable. I think, and yeah, it changed the way the world saw program management at the time. And just a little example there about how it changes during the life cycle. So early stage of the life cycle, Cranfield level 4, strategic thinker. Second, in defining the program, you might have Cranfield level 3, thinking in terms of, okay, what are the outcomes? What detail do we need behind them? And then you go into delivering the tranches, and you might need you're absolutely on the button. Are they overspending? Are they on time? All that sort of stuff. But still needing enough abstraction to cope with the BCMs and the benefits and all the business change that's coming. And the Cranfield level 1, yeah, very focused on detail. You'd put them in charge of the biggest projects in your portfolio, and you'd still call them program managers and program directors because they are so needed. But we just got to recommend they have different views on the world. So when we're looking at continual improvements, what sort of problem areas might we see? Well, these are a few that we picked up on. So program management or project management frameworks under performance and failures. Most of the ones we review are really poor, to be honest. People have gone to one of the manuals, they've lifted all the words and copied them into a document, and nobody ever looks at it. The PM framework needs to be a living thing that people look at. That's why we created the P3M framework based on a portal, because it was easier to access. They're complicated things. They need to include a life cycle, tools, steps, roles and responsibilities and tasks. And the more detail you go into, the more chance you've got to get it right. But they are a real problem. Competence, people struggle with their role. They've been promoted beyond their level of competence, or they've never been trained, or they've been trained on Prince2 and you use an APM. All sorts of madness goes on in that area. Tools, well, we see some organisations spend millions on tools and never use them. They may be inadequate, they were designed badly, and they don't get used, so they were a complete waste of money. These are all, by the way, characteristics of what we would see regularly when we see a level 2 organisation in P3M3. Information, fragmented, inaccurate, unable to draw trends from it. Another real big problem. Those high performers get their information sources sorted. Yeah, you would see characteristics like they'll be missing schedules and budget targets, but and that's not because they're incompetent. It's just they don't have the information to know it. We start to see lots of issues appearing, and which weren't risks. Yeah, really, you want your issues to come from the risk register. But if you're getting lots of issues that were never identified as risks, it's telling you your risks processes aren't working. And quality too narrowly focused, not paying attention to benefits, just making sure widgets work. And even on stakeholder, we speak to stakeholders, yeah, they're not engaged, or they're confused by the communications because nobody's doing the ongoing learning. So a few things to think about there about where you will find opportunities to improve. However good you are, even if you're a level 4, there's opportunities to improve. Just to finish off, I'd like to share with you a case study from one of our clients in the rail industry, who were the first ones to break through and achieve level 4 after 5 years of continual improvement. Now, there was four lessons there that we think you should take on board if you're considering how you build your capability. Number one, involving staff in improvements. They got to level 4 because even though they got out of 2, they got to 3, the staff knew where the improvements needed to be. They knew what was holding them up. They knew how the organisation could improve. So throughout, they included the staff in the process. They were in the process of the bigger picture, getting highest performing organisation, but they were also down in the detail working with them as well. They had a relentless focus on performance. They were managing dashboards everywhere, looking for those small tweaks about where they could find that extra edge. And they had data, they had access to performance data that most organizations wouldn't even dream of doing. But they only got that because they were focused on getting better, and they worked out how to get it. They didn't necessarily do more reporting or anything because they drew and analyzed data from the systems they had. Now, they really started to value professionalism in their organisation, which was something they hadn't had before. You know, project managers were people who just went off and did stuff. They started to be valued by sponsors because they got better at consulting with their sponsors, advising them, engaging early, helping them with solutions. And they trained all their staff relentlessly. They were continually training them, and they got better and better and better. And if you look at the blue box on the right, some phenomenal numbers there. In 4 years, they went from 63% of projects hitting their milestones to 98%. I mean, that is insane, and most organisations can only dream of that sort of stuff. And you know, their work quite often would cause train delays, but if their project overran between 2016 and 2019, 97% reduction. They were responsible for hardly any train delays because their projects were coming on time every time. And they did this during some headcount reductions as well. So there are lessons there. These kind of high performance do exist, but this is all about leadership, determination, and staff involvement. Okay, well, thank you for listening. That's the end of the module. We hope that adds a little bit of extra to the course that you're doing, and good luck with the rest of the material.